I was lucky when I was extremely young to be around people like Bill Dixon. I mean, early in my 20s. And I spent the 70s immersed in his sound world and how he was doing it. And if I understood anything that came before him, it was working my way backwards from that. And there are good things and bad things about that.
Mm-hmm.
But he often said that the music that he was engaged in wasn't predicated on fluency in bebop. That there wasn't a gateway situation where you must do these 2 or 3 things. And most of the people that I would run into at the time that would say that were trying to hold you back from developing, or trying to tell you that you weren't into any shit because you hadn't done X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
So, as Bill would say, fuck those people. That's what my teacher said, and I try to listen to my teacher.
Sure.
He was right. You know, and there were certain people that were using race the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to get too far into that, but
Sure.
but the idea that if you're not this, then you're not happening.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know this, then you're not happening. The teachers that I had would give you as much as you were able to embrace and work on. And if you came back after they told you something and it was clear that you had been working on it, they'd tell you something else. And with somebody like Bill, in terms of being a student with a teacher, I got spoiled because he didn't hold back anything.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't some secret shit that he wasn't going to show you. If you were ready to learn something, he would show you. And as far as you wanted to go, he would do it. And that's not often the case.
Sure. Yeah.
I think, and I don't want to speak broadly about who's teaching in the system because I don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you what, if I was in my 20s, I'd go study with Joe Morris.
Mm-hmm.
Look at his book. Look at how he teaches at NEC. There's nobody that's opened up the music of Cecil Taylor, Ornette Coleman, and arguably John Coltrane, and how they did their work in an ensemble setting and with language in a way that students can quickly pick up and immediately use rather than waiting 5 years to try to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately take them as ways of moving, ways of developing and articulating language, and ways of being together with other players, because that's what those systems are. Rules of engagement, I guess, would be a good way to describe it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a great teacher for that.
He sure is.
I'm biased, you know. But it's true. It really is true.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is to look at the people that have studied with him and what they do.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So.
When did you start working with Bill Dixon?
Well, I first met him kind of by accident in the fall of 1973 when I was 18 years old. At that time, I was a student at Rhode Island School of Design. I was going to study printmaking.
Okay.
It's also where someone introduced me to improvisation, but that's another story. And we were hitchhiking up to see my grandparents who lived in Vermont. We stopped at Bennington College because the guy I was hitchhiking with, who made instruments out of clay, knew somebody at Bennington, and I walked into Bill's studio and talked to him. But then, a couple years later, I was living in Philadelphia, and the people that I was living with were very enamored with Milford Graves.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would hitchhike back and forth from Philadelphia to Bennington to spend time with Milford and everything else that was happening around there. So I started going with them. That's where I ran into Bill. So I would say 1976, so at age 20, 21, something like that. And I knew him from then until he died. I mean, there were times when we didn't talk to each other and times when we talked to each other all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough to work with him on the last several projects that he did. I also sit as an advisor for the Living Trust that we set up with Bill before he passed away to steward and shepherd his papers, his legacy, and his materials.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew him a long time.
So did you studied at Bennington while he was there in his program?
I did, although initially I was at Bennington, and you could do this during the 70s, and people did it with Cecil when he was at Yellow Springs and also in Glassboro. There was a set of people who would go where these people were that were teaching, Cecil or Bill, and they would hang out. Mm-hmm. So I was hanging out, but I wasn't enrolled.
Okay.
I was just up there.
Sure.
I moved up there to be in all his ensembles, but I wasn't a paid student.
Okay. But you could go in
But
and do
then
the ensembles.
you could, and
That's
but
something else,
it was
man.
the '70s, man. I'm just telling you, it was a different time.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously. And then I realized I was doing everything that a matriculating student was doing, but not getting any credit and not getting a degree. And so I applied. I didn't immediately get the answer I wanted, but pretty quickly I did. And got into the school, and then I finished my bachelor's degree as a student at the school.
Okay.
And at the time that I started, the black music division, there were two music divisions. There was the music division and the black music division. And there's a whole story behind that. Partly driven by student organizing and the desire to have something that was freestanding and recognized. Bill went along with that structure, but didn't award degrees in black music because he didn't feel like his division was well resourced enough or had enough faculty to do the depth and range and sequence of curriculum that he knew he would want to do if it was a full division. So it was a full division with a difficult relationship with the college, which didn't last forever. These things were in alignment long enough for me to participate in them. But when I arrived at that school, and there were one or two other students at the same time, remember, Bennington College wasn't like going to a conservatory. You could have people that were enrolled in music there that never could have gotten into Juilliard or Manhattan School of Music or a range of other places. They just couldn't have cut it. So the skill levels of students that he had to work with were all over the place. There were remarkable people, and there were people that were less remarkable with a lot of heart, let's put it that way, right?
Sure.
But I had a certain amount of training, and I had a certain amount of ability when I came up there. So by the time I was getting ready to do my bachelor's degree, he arranged for first me and then I believe two other people that season to get BAs in black music, which were the first BAs that were awarded.
Oh, wow.
For a very limited time. And at the ninth hour, a very specific dean, whose name I won't call, who was known for doing things like this, tried to block the awarding of the degree. In the end, we got it through. I did a senior recital, and didn't participate in graduation because Bill Dixon had agreed to go to Italy for the first time and go to Europe for the first time in years because of Giovanni Bonandrini and Soul Note Records and a number of presenters around the Verona Jazz Festival who asked and asked and asked because he didn't say yes the first time, which is kind of a habit of his. He came over there. So at 20-something, just graduating from college, I was touring with my professor. We made two landmark recordings, Bill Dixon in Italy, Volumes 1 and 2. We did a tour. Started in Verona and ended up in Milano in the Soul Note studios and made some records. I met Andrew Hill through that tour. Alan Silva was the bass player. Freddie Waits was on drums, which is incredible. I mean, hanging out with Freddie Waits was like going to grad school. What a generous person. So I was fortunate enough to have really good instruction as a student at the college, but also Bill, on a regular basis with the limited resources he had, brought all kinds of people to the school. So he brought Alan Silva, he brought Alan Shorter. When he went away for a term, he had Jimmy Garrison subbing for him for a term. He had Jimmy Lyons subbing for him for a term. When I was there as a student, and then later on, we had James Newton up for a festival. We had him up for a week. We had David Ware up there. We had a lot of different people. Jean Lee, I saw for the second time in my life when she came up there. So he brought Freddie Waits up. He brought Stanton Davis. I can't even do the whole list.
Sure.
But he brought master artists up and then kept them there for a week and integrated them with the ensembles, had them do master classes. I mean, he ran a hell of a department. A hell of a department.
That's amazing.
Which is why I lately have thought that I need to go down, dig into the archives at NYU because he recorded every class he taught. And I'm it's hard to explain to other people how deep he was pedagogically if you weren't there.
Sure.
He didn't leave behind written books of that stuff.
Uh-huh.
But he taught the shit out of the music, man. I mean, the history, the theory, all kinds of things. And so, like his intro to black music courses, I mean, really, I should just transcribe that and make it a book and put it out, because it would really rock some people's world, probably.
Sure. I'd read it, for sure.
I think a lot of people would read it. Anyway, again, another rambling answer.
No, I bet. But so, I wonder if this is probably, this might be challenging because of the amount of time you spent either hanging out or in school or traveling with him. But what's an example of, let's say, either a lesson that you learned from him early on, or maybe I don't want to say assignment because that may be too kind of mundane, but
the best way to explain the relationship with him was, he wasn't like other people that I had trumpet lessons with. With Bill, it was somebody where I was so thirsty for what it is that he did. His music, the way he walked down the hall, the way he dressed, the way he talked. I wanted to be Bill Dixon at that age. So I wanted to be able to do whatever he did. I imitated it and tried like crazy to steal it. He might teach me, but you know, there's a real question about how you teach art.
Sure.
We have all this technique and we have all these classes and we can talk about bebop language and everything, but how can you take a young person and make it possible for them to be an artist, right?
Sure.
Because you can't overtly teach what it takes to be an artist. I think what you can do is you can put somebody who's studying in proximity to somebody who's an artist, and with Bill, he worked in front of us. I had trumpet lessons, and I can talk to you about exercises and trumpet technique, but the deep thing with Bill was he shared his process with us. He didn't hide it from his students. He left his house. He was working on his own music in his studio. He was in that music building before any of us were out of bed, and after we were out at night all partying, he was still working on his shit.
Sure.
So he set this example for rigor, for discipline, for a voracious appetite for all kinds of culture and stuff and music and seriousness of intent. So I think the lesson with somebody like Bill was every fucking thing he did was the lesson.
Sure.